And so today we're really focusing in on moods, emotions, feelings, trust, really looking at new distinctions that you might learn around these, as well as ones you already know. We also want to look at, the impact of living in the past and future and how to live more in the present. Being very aware of how these moods and emotions and even trust impact us. There's a lot of things listed here. I won't read all of them. And then we're going to get into some breakout rooms. And so we'll get you to do some of that practicing as well and some conversations about these areas. As usual, our ground rules are listed here. Just making sure if you're not speaking that you've muted your phone. If you want to come off of mute, feel free, but we want to make sure that we don't hear all the background noise. So just make sure you have yourself on mute. We are going to be engaging in breakout rooms, so want to be really clear about when you're in those breakout rooms, if you are able to be on video and really engage with your colleagues through those discussions. Be a beginner. So if there's going to be things that we may mention that you're like, I've heard this before, I really want you to take that as an opportunity to say, what new thing might I pick up today? And then really focusing on yourself. So what is it that you might be able to take from this before you go off and think about how do I engage other people in it? Everyone here is on time and ready to go, so we don't even need to talk about that one. So the first thing we're going to jump into is trust and looking at how trust impacts us. And we're going to learn a little bit. For those of you who've participated in other sessions, you may have heard some of this that I've done. So again, I'm going to ask you to take something, look for something new today. And get my buttons working here. First thing, we're just going to use chat for this discussion. So I want you to think about someone that you explicitly trust. And what are those traits or characteristics that make you trust them? So again, feel free to use chat and just type in some of those characteristics or traits that make you really trust someone else. And we'll see what comes through. Love it. So they care about me and want the best for me. Yeah. So they have my interests in mind. Thank you, Tom. Susan, she puts directness. We're actually going to probably talk about this coming up. Show that they have integrity. Yeah, these are great. Accountability. We have honesty. Consistent in their actions. Oh, I love being a vault or making me feel safe. They're accountable. They keep things confidential. Again, getting to that safety. Same person. I love this one. Same person all the time. So you don't get a different person that shows up depending on the situation. I love these. Okay, well, let me ask you this. What's one thing someone could do that would break trust? One thing. What would that be? Lie. Perfect one. Gossip. Especially if you catch them gossiping about you or someone you hold close to you. But gossiping in general. We got another lie. So saying, directly to your face that they did something, they didn't do it. Inconsistent support. What else? Yeah, telling other people about a conversation we felt was confidential. This gets to that safe space, right? And it wasn't so safe when they're telling other people. Great. Anything else? Anything what someone could do that would break trust with you? Again, just share via chat. Yeah, these are great. When someone's unreliable, when they steal, not keeping their word. So they say they're going to do something, they don't follow through and do it. These are really, disrespectful. Really great examples. Making fun of or being demeaning and how they're speaking to you. great examples. And again, if you've participated in workshops in the past, you may have seen this, but we get a lot of great feedback about a model called the trust equation. And the trust equation is T equals C plus R plus I, all divided by S. Now, I'm not going to make you guess all of these. We're going to go through them, but we're going to talk about them and a little bit of nuance to them. So the first one here is T, and T stands for trustworthiness. So that's the underlying thing that we're trying to get here through this equation. And the C is credibility. And what do you think of when you hear credibility? So what does being credible mean to you? And again, you can either come off of mute or you can put it in chat. But what does credible mean to you? Keeping your word.
Yeah, I think of a witness, and I think believable. You know, a credible witness is believable.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah. I think Emily's kind of putting some more in there too. You can trust what they're telling you is accurate and truthful, right? For some people, and I would say in some jobs, credibility may be reliant on your education level. For example, in the world of community health centers, doctors, there's a certain level of credibility that comes with that MD after their name, right? For some people, it could be that I've seen them do this before, so I know they can do it. So experience, right? Demonstrating that experience. But credibility can mean different things to different people, and knowing what does credible mean to me. For me, I'm not as much now, depending on the domain, right? So in the medical world, I definitely think, both experience and, having the right training matters. But in other domains of my life, that may not be as important. So credibility in another domain may not relate at all to the experience or education piece. So being really aware of what credibility means to you is important. The next piece of this, and you guys were definitely hitting on these in your notes of traits that create trust, is that reliability. When I've heard some of these, reliability for some people is you say you're going to do something and you follow through, you do it, right? What about others? What are other things that are reliability for you or make someone reliable? Anything else come up as it relates to reliability and what that means to you? Quality of the output. So it's not just getting it done, it was also done well, right? Doing what they say they're going to do, being dependable. I love that word dependable. There are folks that I know I can say, hey, could you do this? And I know that's going to happen. And there are other people where I can say, hey, can you do this? And I'm questioning. I may have to follow through or follow up on that. So these are great examples of what reliability means to you. Consistent. Great word to help with that. There's one nuance to reliability that I like to bring up when doing this equation, and that is on the idea of we are human beings, and to meet every single commitment we make may not be possible. Life happens, right? But reliability means that I manage those commitments. So it means that I don't let the deadline come and go without ever talking to you about it. That once I know I'm not going to meet that deadline, I tell you in advance of it. And that's managing my commitments, and that helps with reliability. So we cannot manage time, but we can manage commitments. So reliability, there's a little bit of nuance in that, right? I think we tend to be able to look at folks as more consistent, or dependable, even when they tell us, hey, I know I promised you this. This came up and I can't do it, or I don't have access to it, or whatever it might be. So think about that when you think about reliability. You guys have talked about this next one, intimacy. And when we're talking about intimacy as it relates to trust, we're talking about that psychological safety, that I can have a confidential conversation with you and know you're not going to go and tell someone else about it, that I feel like I can share things that may not always be easy, failures, even successes, right? And know that I have a relationship with you where that's an area where we can have that and it's safe space. So I love the term safe space for that. What about you guys? What is intimacy when we talk about safe space or psychological safety? What else comes up for you around that intimacy piece when it comes to trust? Oh, good one, Susan. Boundaries around personal and professional. Okay, so that's a good one around what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and kind of staying within those boundaries. Anything else? And you guys have said a lot of these, so I think we're in the connected. Great one, Kelly. So I think we're in a good place with what intimacy means in this. So if you can go back to 8th grade math, when you have something that it's probably before 8th grade, as I have a 7th grader doing much more complicated math than I ever did in 7th grade. But when you look at an equation, the most important factor here is that S, right? Because it doesn't matter how much C, credibility, reliability, and intimacy have, because if that S is really high, the dividing number, it's going to take that trust quotient down pretty low, right? So S is one of the most important. And I would even venture to say the most important here. I think you have to have them all, but this one is extremely important. S, anyone guess what S might be? And if you've seen the equation before, you can't cheat here. Any thoughts on what S is? No thoughts? I have a lot of people who will say self-awareness, which is close, but it's not quite. It's self-orientation. And I like to describe this one a bit because I think of it as self versus other oriented, right? Now, it's real easy when you meet people and you have that feeling of, wow, they will do anything to get promoted. That's a really high self-orientation. That's an easy one to notice, right? They tend to be the folks who maybe take credit for things that they didn't do. That's a very high self-orientation. Those are the obvious ones. What I want you to know is we all have a self-orientation. And I like to look at the nuance of it. I like to look at I didn't realize I was being self-oriented examples, because I think that really drives home that we have to look at this. Self-oriented could be, I didn't give someone feedback because I had a fear of how they may react. That actually has nothing to do with the other person. That has to do with me and my concern over how they may react. That means I have high self-orientation. And if my hands are sweating and I want to give the feedback, but I am fearful of how the person's going to react to me, and I decide not to give them the feedback, my self-orientation was higher than my other orientation. But if I really could look at the other individual and say, what do I feel is best for them and their growth? And it doesn't matter how uncomfortable I am in it. And it doesn't matter if I'm fearful of their reaction. It's important for them to hear it because it's going to help them grow. That's where I can say I'm other-centered, that I'm willing to do this even when it's hard for me and even when I'm fearful of how they may react. I often will use the example of doing workshops, right? I will admit I have a high desire to be liked. Just going to put it out there. There are workshops that I do that where that high desire to be liked could get in the way of me actually going into a conversation that's necessary to move the group forward. That I should actually go and make them uncomfortable, even if it means they don't like me, because that's what's needed to take them further, right? It's not an easy place to be. And I will say this is one that gets in my way. And I have to be very aware of it, that my desire to be liked could overtake what is best for the group. Being aware is the first thing. We've talked about this, right? Awareness is key. So I want you to think about self-orientation for a minute. We're going to go into an activity, and I want you to think of a time. So I gave you a couple examples. Giving feedback has one in my past, definitely. And even still, I get uncomfortable with it. Doing workshops, I want to be liked. So think of a time when you have been self-oriented, and how do you think it served you versus how do you think it served others? And I'm just going to give you a minute to think about this. As the example that I used about being liked, it served me because I could walk out of there feeling like everybody likes me, right? Where it didn't serve others, or where it may have not served others, was maybe they didn't get as far as they needed to get to make that next step, right? Or maybe as a group, they needed to be in the uncomfortable so that they could kind of fight through that and become more of a team, if it was a team workshop, something like that. So want you to think about that. And then I want you to think of a time when you have been fully other oriented, right? I can tell you there's been times where I have done workshops where it was straight uncomfortable because I knew the group needed to go into some hard conversations. And rather than use my humor, which I normally do to deflect and change course, I refrained from it. I pulled back and I let them sit in it for a bit, right? It was amazing to see that. I'm recalling one particular team workshop I did, to see how they navigated that and how that would not have happened had I used my normal humor as a tool to deflect the discomfort, right? So how did it serve other people? They definitely got closer to where they needed to go for that next step in their team development. I will say being other-centered served me in teaching me a lesson, right? Teaching me a little bit of when to come in to the team, when not to, as a facilitator. So I learned from that. So we are going to get you into breakout rooms, and we want you to think a little bit more about how you can be more other oriented, and maybe even how you might catch yourself when that self-orientation sneaks up on you. So thinking about these examples that you just kind of came up with to these questions, how did it serve others when you were other oriented? How did it serve others when you were self-oriented? Really thinking about, as a group, ways that you can be more other centered. Okay. And catch yourself in that self-orientation. So Susan, if you're ready, we're going to get folks in their breakout rooms, and I think we're going to have them there for about 6 minutes.
Oh, yeah, we've got 6 breakout rooms. There should be 4 people in each room. Just a reminder that the other people in your room are depending on you to fully engage right now. So if you've been multitasking up to this point and sort of taking some things in, this is the time to set everything down and give your full attention to everybody in that room so you can all share with one another and really learn. So thank you for doing that. And we're off. Oh, 3 to 4 participants per room. So here we go. Hit the join button.
Okay, I think we have everybody back with us. Anyone have any good suggestions or ways that you can be more other oriented, or how you might catch yourself in that self orientation? Anything you got from your group? I know it was a fast conversation.
One thing I'll say is there was a little bit of a theme where, like, we had a story we were telling ourselves about what we were doing or why we were doing it, but then there's also like a convenient other reason. So kind of like being truthful with yourself about the different things that are going on and like weighing those pieces.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Cassie. Yes, we definitely have our stories that we tell ourselves. Anything else?
I think also like knowing what your weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're having those issues, like you you have to self-reflect, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big owner of them. Right.
Yeah. I'm beginning to be very good at it lately too.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So being really aware, like what is it that I bring to the table from a good place, but also where are my own areas to develop? Being able to bring that in, I always bring in I'm not the most detailed, Susan can laugh at this, but I'm not the most detailed person. And so when giving feedback's a great example of this, because when I'm going to give feedback to someone and I don't have those details to back it up, that might not land well with someone who is actually very detail oriented, right? So bringing that into the forefront. We have one, trying not to be too self-aware and be able to communicate with the other person. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that one. Tell me a little bit about that. Hi.
Hi. So my name is Ihoma. So for something we gathered at our session was that we tend to be too much self-reflective, that we want to stay in our own space because we're either in a new environment or we are doing redundant tasks and we just need a little me time, to the point where we might not be able to notice other individuals around us. There might be similar ways in how we can all just combine and interact.
Great. Thank you for explaining that. Super helpful.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you coming off mute.
No problem. Thank you.
So yeah, there's certain things we can do to help ourselves be a little bit more other oriented. And I think in the line of work you all are doing, and I'll use the word other centered right now, but other centered is part of the job for a lot of you, right? Like it's constantly thinking about other people and how do you make the lives better for other people through, quality healthcare and all of these other things. So when we look at this, we take some of this into what we call servant leadership or a culture of service. And so as you look at this slide, this is really just to get you thinking a little bit more about what does it mean to be self-oriented and other-oriented. The primary focus is to get something, maybe power and control. And by the way, this is not to, we often talk about these things as it feels negative. It's more of that recognition that sometimes we are doing this out of a primary focus to have some power, and it could be power over our own emotions, right? So we're going to talk about emotions in a bit. And so that's self-oriented when I'm trying to do that. Whereas other-oriented, that primary focus is to give something. This is in service or influence. Primary traits around self-orientation are around drive and ambition, a lot around the domain intelligence piece, whereas other orientation, fosters more around curiosity and empathy. And we use the buzzword these days, emotional intelligence. Self-orientation, a little bit more of that tool that we use is a little more direct, maybe compete. Whereas other-oriented is more about engaging and coaching. And so this great Robert Greenleaf wrote an essay around servant leadership. It's a small book actually around servant leadership. And a lot of this comes from there. And if you desire to lead, first you must serve is a great quote that came from that. So this slide is really just talking a little bit more about what do those orientation areas look like. I'm going to keep us moving here. The other thing about trust is really understanding that building and maintaining, which I know building trust, everybody has, a big question, like once you've lost it, can you rebuild it? Now, I believe you can. I think it takes both parties to do that and a willingness, but that approach to building and maintaining trust can vary depending on who you're working with. Just when Susan and I started working together, I was giving her feedback on something and I was being pretty soft with my feedback. That's kind of my approach. I hadn't worked with her before. I didn't want to hurt feelings. Our whole conversation was about giving her feedback, and she finally stopped me and said, "So what you're telling me is to stop doing this thing?" And I was like, yes, that's what I'm telling you. And I would never say it that way. And she goes, but that's how I need to hear it. Right. And so that conversation of just feedback and how I was giving her feedback and her willingness to come back to me and say, I need you to say it that way with me, that started building the trust between us even more. I actually went back and told her, don't ever be that direct with me because it's probably going to hurt my feelings. Right. So again, it's different for each person. Know that when you go into this. In addition, we automatically, many of us, without even realizing it, end up constructing these walls of distrust. And by doing this, by creating these walls of distrust, we limit our possibilities and we close some doors. So when we want to think about building and maintaining trust, we just don't always have the ability to do that because we've built up these walls. And there's 4 key ways that we build up these walls. The first one is around participating in organizations that already have this kind of mood of distrust, right? And then we just pick it up without being aware of it. So think about you come into a new role or a new job, everyone around you questions leadership or has this, we don't trust them. And you kind of just fall into that same pattern. By the way, this can be true of communities, friend groups, all of those things. It doesn't have to be just at work, okay? The next way that we might do that is that someone breaks our trust, right? And this is likely due to there was a commitment made and they did not follow through on that commitment. And not only do we no longer trust that individual, we may generalize that entire group that they're with. So now I want you to think about divisions in an organization, right? I'm making up stuff. So just know I'm using these as examples, but you may have your operations group and your HR group. And somebody in HR did something, or they didn't follow through on their commitment. And now we don't trust any of HR. So we classify that whole group as not being trustworthy because one individual in there did something, right? The third one here, we may have some sort of assessment of distrust in a particular domain area. This could be like process improvement, right? And so then we put all the domains into that one area. So we end up not trusting that individual in all areas. So they may be responsible for process improvement. They may be responsible for quality. They may be responsible for project management, all of these things. But because they didn't do something well in process improvement, we now distrust them completely in every domain for which they're responsible. The last one here, the other key way that we end up building these areas of distrust or these walls of distrust is we don't separate those situations in which others broke promises to us. That's a trust issue, right? Versus those situations where we had expectations of the individual. We did not tell them what our expectations were, and then they fell short, right? So we were not clear with what our expectations were. And those were simply unmet because we never told them, right? So now we are making it the fault of that individual. And we're building up that wall of distrust with them, even though we were the ones who didn't clearly speak the expectations we had from the individual. So these are the 4 ways that we build these walls of distrust. And then I think it's important to look at, well, what are the stages of distrust? Because it starts out as doubt. It moves into, doubt is you start to experience some slight uncertainty about someone's trustworthiness, just something that makes you pause for a bit, right? Maybe there was a dismissive thing that was said, but it's just that slight pause. And then you move into suspicion. And with suspicion, this is this belief, but you may not have proof. So maybe there was a pattern of behavior that you've seen that could indicate lack of trust, but you don't have quite the proof that it's there, right? But you got a suspicion. Then you have anxiety. This is our 3rd stage of distrust, which is where you have an uneasiness or an apprehension. You may feel that physically will come up. You may experience like a nervousness when you're around them. Maybe your heartbeat gets rapid. Maybe even move into disgust. Then you move into fear. Now you're afraid to show vulnerability at all. Like you will not show it. Maybe you had some repeated breaches of trust. And so now you're afraid of, or protecting a little bit, moving into that self-protection. You're afraid of your own emotional well-being. And then the final stage here is really around self-protection. And as a result of that fear you experience, you move into that state of self-protection where you put up walls, again, the walls of distrust, right? So that you prevent that other person from getting close to you. This reduces your vulnerability. So when we go back to the trust equation, like there is no longer intimacy, right? You're not going to be vulnerable at all, right? Your self-orientation's really high because you're about protecting yourself, right? And at that point, it doesn't even matter if they've been credible or reliable, right? So this is where that trust equation really starts to make sense, is when you're going through these stages of distrust, thinking about it that way. So there's some other distinctions I just wanted to quickly go through when it comes to trust. There's blind trust versus authentic trust. You know, some of us are more trusting just by personality than others, and maybe that's considered a little bit of blind trust. Like you don't have to earn it. Think of like a child, the trust of a child. You know, we don't think that they'll betray us, so we just trust them with that. Whereas authentic trust, it gets more to what we call that grown-up trust. It's not childlike. There's possibility of things. There's the possibility of betrayal. There's boundaries. There's some assessments and standards, some of the prior workshops we've had. We have the window of trust. This was introduced by President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev. If you are old enough to remember the 80s and in this whole context of the missile treaty, neither leader trusted each other, and they were very public about this. But in this environment, they still decided to open what they called a window of trust. So they'd be able to coordinate, work together. This was to reduce nuclear stockpiles. So a very different experience than maybe we talk about in our window of trust. But they invented that term, trust but verify. I use this a lot. This is where that came from. So trust but verify. And that's where they had inspectors go in. They physically went in and verified what each other was telling the other one. So, you know, a key point in this one is even in an overall environment of distrust, we can all start where we are and open our window. And this is where I really think it's important, as if you're trying to rebuild trust, is thinking about the window of trust. Trust is not only earned, it is also given. I think that one's pretty clear. Trusting yourself and trusting others. You know, I think this is something for us to think about individually, you know, the assessments that go along, the assessments we make about ourselves, the assessments we make about others. You know, this prudence and naivete, you know, that trust with conscious awareness that we have these standards, we're grounding our assessments. So I'm bringing in all these past workshops. That's the basis. And when we think about naivete, we think about extending with no connection at all to facts or grounded assessments, right? We're being really naive in that. Learning trust versus learning math, science, and programming. And so this is trust can be learned. It's just not the same as learning math, science, and programming, okay? It requires immersion, choice, and it requires feedback. So really thinking about that. All right, we're now going to move into moods, emotions, and feelings. So I want to get you guys involved a little bit more again. I've been talking a lot. How would you define or describe each one of these? How are they similar? How are they different? And I'm going to pause for a second. I love what Sinitra wrote too. Trust is not automatic. Some feel it should be depending on the position. Like if you're in a leadership position, or if you're, you know, the head of something, or you're owning a particular area, that we should just automatically trust you. And I think, Sinitra, that's a great, you know, we are constantly working on both ends to both be trusting and also, you know, have others trust us and also trust other people. So I love that piece. So moods, emotions, and feelings. How are they similar? How are they different? Any thoughts?
I would say that these all fall under like a temporary, they're not, you're not permanently down or you're not permanently high. Feelings come and go, emotions come and go. So I'd say a similarity might be that they're temporary.
Love that, Tom. And I'm actually going to touch on that. So that's a great teaser for that. And some are faster than others. Some can be much more long-term, but I think you're hitting on a key point is there's some similarity there that they don't have to last forever. So we have some control over that, right? That's great. Thank you. Oh, Marianne, yes. And they are different for each person. I mean, we will do another slide, repeat, like we are unique in observers in this world. And we all have our past experiences and it plays into it, right? So absolutely can be different. I always say words that trigger me may not trigger you and vice versa, right? So those are great. So we're going to watch a quick video. I'm going to play it and hopefully if one or two of you could just give me thumbs up once I hit play that you actually can hear it. But this is about feelings, emotions, and our brain. So we're going to talk, just have a little bit of an intro. I mean, this is a 2-minute video, so we can only get so much about our brain here. But just to give you a little bit of a teaser on feelings, emotions, and our brain.
When we hear the word emotion, most of us think of love, hate, happiness, or fear. Those strong feelings we experience throughout life. Our emotions are the driving force behind many of our behaviors, helpful and unhelpful. Just where do our emotions come from? Our brain is wired to look for threats or rewards. If one is detected, the feeling region of the brain alerts us through the release of chemical messages. Emotions are the effect of these chemical messages traveling from our brain through the body. When our brain detects a potential threat, our brain releases the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol, which prepare us for a fight or flight response. When we detect or experience something rewarding, such as someone doing something nice for you, our brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, or serotonin. These are the chemicals that make us feel good and motivate us to continue on the task or behavior. In these instances, the feeling region of the brain kicks in before the thinking part. Sometimes the reactions of the feeling brain are so strong that it dominates our behaviors and we're unable to think rationally in the moment. Our emotions hijack our brain. While many of our emotional responses happen subconsciously, our thinking can influence our emotions, and sometimes this can be unhelpful. Just thinking about something threatening can trigger an emotional response. This is where we can manage our emotions with conscious thinking. Our emotions play a powerful role in the way we experience the world. Understanding and regulating our emotions through our thoughts and behaviors can help us take greater control of our brain and achieve our goals.
Okay, so I think this is a great video to just get you understanding. And then I would feel remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until you're 25 or 26. So if any of you have ever been a 13-year-old who felt like you reflect back and were out of control, it's because you didn't have the full thinking brain. It was feelings taking over, right? I say this as I lovingly have a 14-year-old and 12-year-old. And I remind myself of that. So I love this connection to the brain and what happens, and that we get hijacked. And that's the word that I think is so important, is we allow, and I think that's key. We are allowing that part of the brain to take over for us. So just to dig a little deeper into moods and emotions and feelings, just going to get these to come up. There's a lot of information on this slide. You will get the slides, so I don't talk to every single thing. But in the work that we do, we describe feelings as these complex assessments. We've made assessments about these, right? It can, Susan may have a totally different assessment about a situation and have a different feeling about it. But we've made that complex assessment. Moods and emotions are these predispositions for action, right? They can be healthy and connected to survival, right? Everybody talks about saber-toothed tiger coming after you, right? That fight or flight. And they showed up long before language came to us, okay? That's that fight or flight piece. We can think of emotions as arriving as a result of an event or circumstance, whereas moods kind of were there and maybe they arrived before you did, right? Thinking about that. Emotions can be external. I won't go through every single one, but they can be externally triggered, whereas moods may not be triggered by events or circumstances. Moods tend to be longer term, whereas emotions tend to be shorter term. Have you ever met someone that just always seems to be in a mood? And maybe that mood is calm and content, right? Or maybe that mood is not, right? So it's a little longer term. Emotions can shape that immediate action that we take, whereas moods maybe determine a range of possible actions that we would take. You can read the rest of these. I won't read them all to you. I think the key here is we're identifying emotions as a bit shorter term in regards to that, whereas moods are a longer term. The mood, we sometimes don't see that we're in the mood or have the mood. So just remembering those things. So a lot of examples around here. I've seen people in a mood of boredom. I've seen people have the emotional boredom, right? Where they're not in that mood, but then they experience the emotion of it. So again, all of these could be moods or emotions. Just to also clarify, these are not right or wrong or bad or good. They are totally natural, specifically our emotions, and important for us to live healthy lives. Where they can get us in trouble a little bit is when we continuously repress the emotion, or we may not be allowed to express the emotion. So here are some examples of this. For example, grief. If we don't actually have the experience, if we're repressing that for a long period of time, or we feel as though we are not allowed to express it, that may turn into depression. Okay, so that's where it becomes the unhealthy. Anger may turn into rage. Fear may turn into panic. Envy may turn into jealousy, and love can turn into possessiveness. So even in our positive emotions, if we continually repress it or we're not allowed to express it, it can turn into something that is not positive. Okay. And again, just as we talked about in one of our earlier sessions, we are unique observers of this world, looking at this as if we are through the lens of a camera. The body part is the lens, our language that we use is our aperture, and our moods and emotions are like that shutter speed, right? At the end of the day, we are a walking, talking bundle of congruency. So how we have lived our lives up to this point, it may be understood better as our way of being. Okay, what is our way of being in the world? I got apparently really excited about videos today, so we're going to watch one more video, making sure we can hear this. And this is our power. Actually, I'm not sure you can see it, but it's the power of perception and reality, emotions and reality. So I'm going to press play.
I'm going to play a recording of people chanting, "That is embarrassing," 4 times. After the 4th time, write down what you hear. Interesting. Almost everyone here heard "that is embarrassing." Listen again and watch the screen. You heard the same thing every single time. Our eyes and ears take in electrical signals which our brains interpret based on our expectations. We don't see reality. We see our reality. I'm going to play.
Okay. Susan found this video and it blew me away. And imagine if we replaced what you see with what you feel. Right? So it's not reality. It's our reality. Very powerful video to demonstrate, what we see, what we are feeling is not reality. We are creating that. And we're creating that through our language, right? Our thinking, our moods, our emotions, our feelings. That's how we're creating it. I just loved this video.
I'm going to play a
Gonna
recording.
keep us going here. So when you think about the moods below, I'm just going to pull all this up. I want you to think about how you define them. What's the differences between them? What's the relationship between them? So we have these moods: boredom, arrogance, perplexity and confusion, wonder, awe, amazement. So how would you define them? What are the differences, or what is the relationship? Any thoughts on these moods? And if I were to ask you, what's the relationship between each of these moods to learning? What would you say? And we could just take wonder, wonder, awe, and amazement and learning. What's the relationship there? Or do you see a relationship? If I have a mood of wonder, awe, and amazement, is that going to impact learning more than my mood of arrogance? I'm seeing a head nod.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
Drawing on that previous video, like these moods set your expectation. If this is a mood versus an emotion, I'm in a bored mood, you're expecting to continue in that mood. And therefore your brain reacts differently to what's coming at it.
Yes, I often say, if you want to look for it, you will find it. Fill in what the it is. If I want to look for something new and exciting, I can go find that. If I want to look to be bored, I can find that. Right? So if you are looking for it, Susan, great point, you will find it.
Yeah. I want to reiterate that because my dad was a detective and he used to tell me, Tom, if I watched anybody close enough for 24 hours, I would catch them breaking the law.
Wow.
And I would say, what's that supposed to mean, Dad? And he would say, if somebody is focused on a topic, on something, they're gonna find it. And that was a great lesson for me. It really was. And I just thought I'd share that with everybody.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. I mean, that video that we just showed, when it had Bart Simpson, I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Because that's what I started to hear. It's such a great reminder that we are so subject to both our surroundings and like the information. Think of all the information, especially nowadays, that is just accessible at our fingertips. And what are we doing with that? Right? Really powerful stuff. Thank you, Tanya. I agree. I think people do learn better with wonder than they probably do with boredom. I think that's probably a true statement. Just like arrogance, thinking I know more than you do, I'm probably not going to learn very much from you if I feel that way. Perplexing, I think, actually could be a space of learning, a mood of learning. right? Maybe that takes me into curiosity. So these are interesting ways to look at moods, how they're different, and how they relate to our learning. So, Susan, I'm not going to remember I think it was 90 seconds, but you had done some looking into emotions, right? And you said that, I think you provided me some materials. This may come in Noddlepod, hint, hint, teaser, that emotions pass, it was in less than 90 seconds. Was that it?
Yeah, that physical reaction that they talked about in the video, like you have this stimuli and you're going to immediately feel an emotion. And if you just let it be and don't attach language to it, that immediate emotion lasts about 90 seconds.
Great. Thank you. Have you guys ever found yourself thinking about the past or thinking a lot about the future, the what ifs? You found yourself doing that, living in the past or living in the future? And I'm curious, did you find that helpful, productive, or enjoyable? Now, there could be, right? Maybe there could be some daydreaming about opportunities in the future and things like that. They could be happy, fond, exciting. Maybe there's some past where we're living in that can be fond memories that we've had with family and friends. And gosh, Emily, you are just getting us right to where we're going to go with this, is thinking about what are the moods that are related to doing this. So what might be a mood that's related to living in the past? Why might we do that? And I'm thinking more of our not as productive moods, a little bit negative mood space. Why would we be living in the past? Emily's like on top of this. She has regret. You know, the words that they used in some of the Language in the Pursuit of Leadership Excellence book is around guilt and shame, which I think comes from regret, right? But oftentimes when we are ruminating in that past, it's coming from these moods of guilt and shame. And what about future? Again, I'm not talking about the daydreaming about these exciting things in our future, but more when we're like ruminating and like can't stop thinking about it. And you know, I love that Emily said this because she just hit it right on the head, which was anxiety or worry. Anxiety and worry. So we really want to think about and take steps of how do we become more about living in the present? So much of our mind and energy is spent in thinking about the past, worrying about the future, right? How can we actually get out of that and live more in the present? And I'm going to pull up a slide you've seen. Going from, if I have this, then I can do these things and I can be this person, to really flipping that and saying, who do I want to be? And starting there. And if who I want to be, what would that person do? Right? And what will I have if I'm able to be that person and do those things? So bringing this slide back, this is something we showed in our earlier, one of our earlier sessions. And then there are some guidelines for designing moods. I'll call them mood spaces. And so I do want to look at some of these. Being able to observe the moods that you yourself are in, but also others, and identifying them as moods and not just how things are. So when I see that person who complains all the time, rather than seeing them as a complainer, right, I can see that as a mood space that they're in. Recognizing we are not responsible for those moods we're in. We didn't purposefully create it. We just happen to be in it. Where we are responsible for is how long we want to stay in it, or we'll put ourselves in it. So once we recognize it, becoming that better observer, what is it that, do I want to stay here? Do I want to get out of it? Beware of the stories we have built around our moods. So we tend to say there are moods that are right. There's moods that are wrong, things like that. So just be careful or beware of those stories. Looking at those assessments that we've made that are consistent with the mood, when did we make them? What were they based on? We need to look at those. Do that grounding. So remember from a prior conversation, we talked about grounding assessments. What were the standards we created around these? What are new actions we could take that could lead to new assessments? How might we anticipate moods? This one is key for me. There are certain family members that when I am around them, I am in a mood. Just going to put it out there. I'm human too. So how might I anticipate that? And how might I work through it so that I don't find myself in that mood? Surround yourself or be with people who don't give space for certain moods, right? That can snap you out of them. Pay attention to the body, the physical, the biology domains. This is where new action can be. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. And don't forget, it's not about avoiding moods. It's about recognizing when we're in them and then determining how long we're going to stay on them. And then I feel like I love this last one. If you don't see yourself as having moods and understand that almost all of your experiences are shaped by these mood spaces, then you don't have them, they have you. So talking about that, 3 avenues for designing moods, we do have the biological, the physical, and the conversational. And a lot of the work we've talked about in these now 6 sessions, we've talked a lot about conversational, right? We've talked about conversations with others, conversation with self, coaching, getting others involved in providing feedback or getting support, things like that. So we've talked a lot in that conversational space, but we also have 2 other avenues. One is biological. What are we eating? What are we drinking? What are we putting in our body? What food choices do we make? Whether this is a certain type of nutritional diet, because we know it works better for us. I've recently, growing up in the country on a farm, I no longer eat red meat. And I know it's to the complete dissatisfaction of my father that I no longer eat red meat, but I know that it doesn't serve my body well, right? So figuring those things out. Also sleep and how important that is. We also have the physical piece, how we sit, how we hold ourselves, stand, our breathing, thinking about activities we could do that rejuvenate that piece, like yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, all of these things. So there are 3 avenues for how we can design our moods. And that's going to take us into another small group activity where we're going to have you identify in your group, and this requires a note taker, so someone who's willing to take some notes electronically so that we can share these in chat when we come back. We'd like each group to come up with 5 ways that you could design your own mood. This could be looking at the biological piece. It could look at the physical piece or the conversational or combination of them, but just 5 ways you can design your own mood. These may be things you're already doing. So I want to be clear, this doesn't have to be recreate the wheel. If you're already doing something, share it. Oftentimes we learn best with and through other people. So hearing what you're doing that works for you may ignite something in us. When we come back from the breakout room, we will have you share this in the chat so that we can create a takeaway for you. And then you're going to have a laundry list of things you can do to help design your own mood. So that's what we want to come away with this. Any questions before we get you into your breakout rooms on this? And Susan, I think we could do between 6 and 7 minutes for this. I think we have time for that. So let's go ahead and make that's at least 6 minutes.
Okay. Sounds good. We're going to have you in 4 breakout rooms this time. It should be approximately 5 per room, depending on where everybody is. And same reminder, jump in there, give it all you've got, get out what you put in. So let's put in a lot.
Yeah,
And
it's
here
6
we
minutes.
go. And you may join.
All right. I am excited to see what you guys all came up with as you were in your groups thinking about ways that you could design your own mood or moods. So if you are ready to copy and paste into the chat what you came up with, we'd love to see it. All right. We have positive self-talk and mastering your stories. I love this. Master your stories. Know the stories you tell yourself and live in. Power poses. There's a bunch of Amy Cuddy was the first person to start talking about this, I think. Power poses to build that confidence. Conscious decision to focus on the positive versus the negative. Noticing signs early so you can course correct, and setting yourself for success with your gas tank full, taking care of yourself. Really great ideas and ways that you can create mood. We have make sure you're getting a good night's sleep. Absolutely. Enjoy your favorite workout. I love how you wrote that. Enjoy your favorite workout. For so long, I looked at exercise as a chore and something I had to do. And flipping the script on that, I get to do this and my body still allows me to do it, made such a difference. Listen to music that's appropriate for the mood you want to create. Be aware of your facial expressions. Decide how you want to present. Make a commitment to being open to what others bring to the table. Love it. Try to be compassionate at all times. Hard to do sometimes, but yes. Understanding my darkness, self-awareness, love it. Any others that groups came up with, your 5 ways that you can design your own mood? Anything else that you guys had? I love how there was a mix between this, the biological, the physical, and conversational. Great mix of these. All right, I'm going to keep us moving. I'm a quote person. I like quotes. I won't read them all to you. They'll come in the slides. But some of my favorites from this, that resentment is the poison I drink, hoping you'll die. Just such a good one. Like, how long do we sit in that resentment, hoping the other person feels it? And it doesn't work like that. It's only poisoning me. So love that one. I love this. Trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. It feels that way. Really does feel that way. The best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust them. Captain Obvious, Ernest Hemingway. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything can be counted counts. So our lovely Albert Einstein left us with that. So I love quotes as good reminders around these types of topics. And then I'd love to hear in chat just one takeaway that you have as we wrap up today from our session. And this could be either from today or just all of the sessions. What is your big takeaway that you've had? And again, if you can share via chat, we'd love to see what your takeaways are. And if you're more comfortable coming off mute, feel free, but up to you. What's one takeaway? Oh, thanks, Susan. This is a big one from the overarching program itself. Language creates and generates. It does not simply describe. Love it.
Yeah, ever since that first one, I've just really noticed this everywhere. This idea of just the power of language. I've always been a language person, but this whole idea that how much it's creating and generating and building and destroying is, it really ever since that came up and I've been super aware, it's been boggling my mind for the past few months.
It's one of those, once you see it, you can't unsee it kind of things, which is, big thing for me. Oh, thanks, Tom. We have loved having you be part of this. Glad you have felt like there's been some challenges, some good takeaways, that you've created some better self-awareness for yourself. Just great to hear. So thank you. That means a lot. Anyone else have any key takeaways? Oh, we have some. Oh, the emotions can change. Yes. I love that clicked. And increasing self-awareness for you too, Tanya, which is great. The moods moods versus emotions. I thought that was good too. Self-awareness is vital. And thanks for agreeing with Tom. Wonderful. Well, we appreciate you guys being here. We just have a couple more slides to go through. We have some next steps. In our next steps, as usual, the Noddlepod discussion question, it may just be one in December. We realize people are going to be out and about, but please engage in the conversation. This is going to be our final Noddlepod discussion with your colleagues. So Susan will be posting something out there for you in December. Ongoing, continue to practice these new distinctions. Always reflect on what you've been learning here. And as I always say, rinse and repeat, just keep repeating it. The last thing I will mention is there will be a subscription series in 2024. It will not be the same as what we've done here. So more to come on that from the NAC team on what that offer will be. It's going to be around an assessment. There's going to be, a coaching component to it. And then we will dive into these dig a little deeper into these components of the assessment. So look forward to doing that with those of you who are able to join. So be on the lookout for that. Last thing is that we will put a survey link in the chat. That is for today's session, or for the full program, not just today's session. I misspoke. So make sure you take the time to complete that. Any feedback, even if you feel like you don't know how we will receive it, I want you to let go of that self-orientation. Don't worry about us. We can take it. We're adults. We can take some hard stuff, but any feedback that you have, we would appreciate to hear it so that we can just make these offerings better and better for all of you.